Hey, I'm Frank, host of Reader's Labyrinth. I would like to welcome my guest, Andrew Gillsmith. As with most of my guests, putting Andrew's writing into a specific genre might prove a bit difficult. But here we are, and I suppose that science fiction, at least for the moment, is going to work best. His latest book, The Final Season, is an ironic and humorous take on the end of days trope that is often found in science fiction, featuring the unfortunate citizens of Rexos 4 suffering the fate of figuring out that their whole existence is part of a vast conspiracy, and quoting directly from Andrew's Amazon's author page, the subject of the longest running and most successful reality television series in galactic history. The show is entering its all important final season. I am particularly excited about an earlier novel of Andrew's entitled Our Lady of the Artilects. It's a novel exploring religion, philosophy, AI, and the apocalypse. I personally have purchased a copy of Our Lady of the Artilects, and I'd encourage you to hop on over and get yourself a copy as well. You'll find a link to Andrew's author page where you can explore his works, as well as his Twitter handle, and we can catch up with him there. As for the interview itself that you are about to see, I first reached out to Andrew and I invited him into the Labyrinth because I had in mind I wanted to discuss artificial intelligence, but most specifically how Chat GPT and its future incarnations will affect the writing, reading, and publishing landscape. Now, most of my author guests who I have on here, I've had the opportunity of reading their book and talking mainly about their stories. So, what you're about to get is something a little bit different. However, we both agree to these boundaries, mainly Chat GPT, but almost as soon as I'd signed Andrew into Riverside FM, these carefully laid plans went totally out the window. And what a beautiful sight it was. What resulted is the interview you are about to watch and listen to. If I could describe my talk with Andrew, I'd say that I went hunting for wild turkey and came back with a velociraptor. I hope you enjoy the rabbit holes of what is consciousness, references to pre-Socratic philosophers, and the terrifying new religion that is transhumanism. It was an hour very, very well spent on our end, and I hope for you as well. If you enjoy Reader's Labyrinth, I'd invite you to like and subscribe. Leave a comment as well. And if you are an author and you're watching this interview, and if there's a little bit of curiosity in there about wanting to come on the show, shoot me an email. You can find the details in the show notes, my email address, and everything. And now let's get on with the interview. Flow of consciousness. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to remember a time not that long ago, because I'm not that old. I mean, I'm 50-ish, um, when people could agree to disagree, when people could have radically different ideas and be friends, have civil conversations. You know what I mean? Like actually learn from each other, actually maybe even change their opinion. Like, and I mean, these concepts just seem completely, antiquated now, right? I mean, it's like Ottoman history. Uh,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
there was a time when people could communicate with each other civilly. There was a time when rational debate could be held, between radically different viewpoints. But
Well,
it's where we
well,
are.
well, do you know what? So for the listeners who are just kind of jumping in right now, me and Andrew were kind of talking off the record about the past, the Ottoman Empire, some really, really cool stuff. So I just kind of hit the record button in the middle. But, to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, Andrew, if you think about it, the seeds for this were sown back in the Spanish American War. Whenever, one of our, one of our cruisers was in Havana Harbor, it was blown up
Hmm.
All the evidence at the time was pointing to the fact that, hey, this was an honest mistake. The Spanish weren't swimming out there and putting a bomb underneath it, but the newspapers were just going hog wild with it. And then the next thing you know, we're at a war with Spain. We're invading Cuba, we're invading the Philippines, and I think that there is a market incentive to drive clicks, and social
Oh yeah.
media is providing us a dopamine release whenever we get the tribal clap. Whenever we get the tribal clap,
Right.
I mean, and you know, the thoughts that you're presenting, everything is so tribal, and every single opinion that you put out there, someone comes along with a purity test. I
Hmm.
mean, it's like the purity test. Well, if you think this, so what do you think about this totally
Right.
unrelated event? And
Yeah,
then
and I mean, I fail every purity test that there is. So
I hear you,
I
brother.
don't take them. As soon as
I
people
know
start going
exactly
down that
what.
path, I'm like, oh no. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to disagree with you, vehemently, within two questions. So, I mean, we can go there if you want. I'm not going to. It's no skin off my back. I don't. I
Exactly.
have
Yeah. Yeah.
friends from radically different viewpoints, and always have. Um, yeah, that's interesting. The Spanish Civil War connection. I never thought about that. I mean,
Yeah.
and again, I
Goes
don't want
way
to take us
back.
too
Yeah.
far off topic, but um, it's particularly dangerous, I think, also in a modern liberal democracy, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Yes. Yes, it
Because
is. Yeah.
right, because I mean, when there were, and I mean, I'm not advocating for this, but when we had more, I guess, hierarchical, sort of controlled forms of government. I'm sure there was media. I'm sure there were rabble rousers, and people would whip a crowd into a frenzy. But at the end of the day, the people in charge were the people in charge,
Exactly. Yeah.
and so they're not going to necessarily get the country into a war that has no value and high risk just because of a bunch of headlines and social media dopamine hits. But in modern liberal democracies, that is very much a danger.
And the foundation of a modern day, a liberal democracy is traditions. Because we can take
Hmm.
a country like the Russian Federation. They have, all the branches of government that the United States does. They have a judicial branch. They have this executive branch, a representative branch, but there's no
Hmm.
real traditions of autonomy, and it's all like a firewall for just this one network, one guy that's controlling everything. And there's so
Yeah.
much that our freedoms are protected by these unwritten traditions that are
Yeah.
baked into our institutions. And what I see, and this is going to circle back around to the topic, because the topic that we were going to talk about is artificial general intelligence. And what I see is like the worst elements of both the left and the right are they're fixing to be handed what Steve Skojec put as a geopolitical equivalent of nuclear weapons into their hands. I mean, the ability to multiply
Yeah.
exponentially bad ideas, to push bad ideas, and just the amount of content, the cosmic scale of information that is fixing to deluge the information space.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah. I
really,
mean, it's terrifying, right? I mean, it's and I mean, I think, and again, I mean, like anytime you have these conversations, anytime I have these conversations now, I feel like, well, I'm starting to sound like a fuddy duddy, and I don't think of myself as a fuddy duddy, but I don't know. Maybe it's just maybe it is part of getting older. I don't know, but we also live in an age when I think, the general capacity for reason, for critical thought, critical analysis is pretty impoverished. I mean, it's meme culture. It's highly emotional arguments. If you can even
oh, yeah,
use,
yeah.
if you can be generous enough
Well,
to use that term, that
yeah.
shape opinion,
Well, the
and it's dangerous.
well, the paradigm of the world that we're living in is that, your emotions are truth. It's not logic. I mean,
Right.
we were talking about Twitter and how that's pretty much the only social media that I'm on, and it's mainly to connect with authors and other content creators.
Right.
The amount of logical fallacies that people use unironically
Oh
to
yeah.
pad hominins, inductive logical fallacies, formal, informal. I mean, it's like, and you can show where their logic is wrong, their facts are wrong, their conclusions are wrong. But it's like in 1984 when Winston was being interrogated by O'Brien. How do you argue with somebody who may be more intelligent than you are? You present an argument, you present reality, and they dismiss it and just persist in their own lunacy.
Yeah.
What do you do? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like,
I don't think that it's possible to persuade anyone of anything anymore.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Right. I mean, like, I don't know, maybe, again, maybe it has always been this way, right? I mean, a lot of neuroscientists, and philosophers that I like to read, um, both for just pleasure, but also because it's important to understand this stuff for some of my books. It's have said that reason really has always been a servant of emotion, right? We decide what we want to believe, and then reason is the tool that we use to justify that belief. I don't know if that's true. I think it's partly true. I think there's more to it than that. But
Wasn't there a
we just live in an
discredited,
era now where it's so easy, right?
wasn't there a school of philosophy called solipsism? And I am butchering the word, where it's like
What is it again?
it's called solipsism or solipsism. I am probably
Oh, yeah, Solips,
that's
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So I mean, that kind of reminds me of that. This idea that, hey, I'm going to sit around and create this subjective reality that is going to influence the objective reality. And I mean, and another fallacy of social media is that everything is so damn public now. I mean, I think part of
oh
the
yeah,
issue with, if you're debating someone, if you're trying to convince someone of an argument, is they have so much skin in the game if they admit that they're wrong. And it's like, well, if I admit that I'm wrong, that's going to make me look weak. It's going to influence all this little tribal stuff that's going on. But I don't
oh
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, well,
without doubt.
yeah, yeah. Well, so what I'm guessing is that I'm definitely going to be having you on a guest in the future if you are so generous to talk about a book I'm really interested in, Our Lady of Artilects. And I understand that you studied the Ottoman Empire to get a little bit of feedback into that. That's cool.
I did,
And
yeah, a little bit.
that's right.
Several
And
empires,
oh
Ottoman
wow,
being one.
awesome,
The
awesome.
Mughal Empire also
Oh yeah, yeah,
was
yeah. Okay,
important
okay. All
inspiration, and
right, I got you.
the Holy Roman Empire in its various forms. And of course, the old joke, right, that it was not holy or Roman, and
That's right.
also
Yeah.
wasn't really much of an empire.
There was this hilarious meme I saw on Twitter, since we're talking about social media, and it had the Joker from The Dark Knight smiling, and it goes, "Do you want to know how I got these borders?" And it had a map of the Holy Roman Empire. I thought it was this, I was like, nerd heaven, nerd heaven. Only
Yeah,
nerds are gonna get it.
that's deep nerd humor
Yeah, it is.
territory.
Yeah. Well, so
Uh,
what I normally like to do before I have a guest on is read their works. I like to buy a copy of them, leave a review of them, because there's so many interviews out there, Andrew, of an author will go on a show ostensibly to talk about their book, and it's painfully within 5 seconds that the interviewer hasn't even touched the book. I
yeah.
didn't want to do that for Reader's Labyrinth, but you seem like such a cool guy. It seems like you've
No,
got a
thanks.
lot to, yeah, it seems like you got a lot of insight for us. And I promise I'm going to have you on and I'm going to read some of your books. Well, your two books that are available on Amazon, and we can talk
Yeah,
about it.
3 now.
But free.
Yeah,
Oh, really? Okay.
there's Our Lady of the Artilects,
Okay. 3.
and I'm about halfway through the sequel for that now, and I'm
No way. Okay. Cool. Cool.
hoping to have
Cool.
that out
All
by
right.
the end of the year. Um,
I have
and
one
then
in my
there's another
hand. I'll hold
series.
them up.
There's another series. So Our Lady of the Artilects is heavy.
Mhm.
It deals in
We
serious
like heavy
themes.
here. We like heavy
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it gets into serious themes. I mean, a lot of it is, it's also very personal. A lot of it is about this kind of fuzzy boundary between science and faith, and various ways of looking at the world. And how do you reconcile those two ways of approaching reality? Um, and when I finished it, I was like, I need a break. you know, like I, I need something light. And my favorite author by far of all time is P.G. Wodehouse. And if you don't know him, if your readers don't know him, he's was an English humorist, really wildly successful and popular from like the 1920s. And he wrote about this kind of like class of Edwardian um, dolt, sort of like
Okay.
twits,
Yeah.
who had more money than sense. And it's just, I mean, I think has the greatest command of the English language in history. I mean, truly, like his writing just sings, and it's hilarious. And so I read and I always go back to it when I need a boost of joy. So I went back and read like 4 or 5 of his books, and I was like, I want to write something funny. I want to write something light. So I wrote this Planet Gallywood series, which is kind of a lighthearted satire of Hollywood, um,
The final
set in outer
season,
space.
right?
Yeah, the
Okay,
final
cool,
season.
cool.
And
I
then there's
love
a
it. I love
sequel
it.
called
Yeah.
The Pilot.
Okay, awesome, awesome, man. I love it. Where did these so where did these creative juices come from? Are there writers in the family? Have you always wanted to be an author?
I've
Is this
always
something
wanted to
that
be a writer,
Mhm.
and I was always afraid to do it. I was a religion major in college just because I was fascinated with it. And there are all kinds of personal stuff that went into that too, which we can get into if you want. But being a religion major doesn't necessarily lead to terrific career opportunities.
I double majored in
So,
history and philosophy, so I hear you
oh,
on
so
that. Yes, I do. The humanities,
right,
the struggle is real.
yeah. So anyway, I graduated. I thought, well, maybe I'll be a professor, or maybe go to law school at some point. But for now, I want to be a writer. So I moved to New York, and I actually got an offer to be a writer for a newspaper there,
Oh,
right,
cool.
which was
Okay.
amazing. And then I saw the offer, and it was like sub minimum wage. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like I'm going to live in an apartment with 15 roommates and a horde of rats, kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't know, man, this is brutal. And then I ended up getting an offer to go work for this like hedge fund, um, kind of in like a business development, sales, marketing capacity. And this was right at the birth of the internet, 1994, 95. And I took that job because of the money, and always regretted not being a writer, and finally got to the point where I said, I'm going to do it.
That is awesome. Yeah. So there's kind of a lot going on. You were an undergraduate in religion. You were almost kind of following, probably something that was more than a passion. It was probably something that you had some latent talents in you for. And then I'm thinking of the birth of the internet, and I'm thinking of some just these milestones of humanity that's happened in the past 20 years.
Mm,
But we can talk about some milestones, some great filter events, I think, that we're passing through or we are approaching for humanity. In the past year, we've had about two things happen. Sorry about that. My allergies here in South
that's okay.
Carolina are kind of riding me good.
I'm
But
outside.
we
Mine
have
could kick in
crossed
any
two.
second.
Oh, okay. I hear the birds chirping back there. That sounds
Oh, I'm
really
sorry about that.
nice. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, no, no. That is perfectly cool. It's gonna if this was a post-apocalyptic movie when the heroes are traveling and they encounter like a playground with the swing going, the birds are going to kind of have that effect for us. So I think that's cool. But the two great filter events that we are approaching, number one was when NASA landed a satellite or a rocket on the asteroid and they altered its course slightly. I think that is going to be a possible watershed moment for humanity
Mm,
because hypothetically speaking, we might have the technology to prevent, just a cataclysmic event like what happened to the dinosaurs. And we have the ability to alter what would be the Earth's natural course of history, which is an
hmm
asteroid that is going to impact every, I don't know, I'm starting to get into some deep waters here, every 100 million years or whatever it is. But we have the technological capability of changing that fate for planet Earth. The second great filter event is I don't know if it's the advent, the emergence. I don't really know. And I hate those terms. Those terms are so spooky now. I mean, with you being
hmm
a religion major, my background in history, I'm thinking, the emergence of artificial general intelligence. And before, it was just kind of like a broken version of Alexa. But now what we're seeing with Chat GPT 3 and then what is it, GPT 4 now, we're seeing it take on this uncanny ability to kind of elbow its way into the white collar and the creative realms. So I
hmm
was wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Just kind of an open a discussion of that? Like, what's your thoughts on it?
Uh, it's like asking for someone's opinion of the ocean, right? I mean, there's a lot there, and it's not all
Yeah,
good and
that's a
it's not
good
all
point.
bad, but it's big. Um, as a creator, right? I mean, my sympathies are with fellow human creators. The writers are on strike in Hollywood
Oh yeah, that's right.
right now, and that's hurting a lot of people. And so I'm very supportive of what they're doing. I'm very supportive of writers who are speaking out against this, sort of encroachment of AI. I think, from what I can tell so far, the output of AI generated fiction is terrible. I mean, it's borderline unreadable. That won't always be the case. It will get better and better and better, right? And it will um, develop styles, right? I mean, I think
Oh
you can
yeah, for
fully
sure.
expect that there'll be Stephen King books that are written in Stephen King style and have his voice long after Stephen King is gone. Um, Maybe we'll even get a sequel to Winds of Winter, or a sequel to to A Chance with Dragons,
That's
and
right. Yeah.
and an end to A Song of Ice and Fire. But uh, I don't think, this is a personal opinion, I don't think that AI is ever going to be able to replace that unique spark of human genius that you find in great works. I just don't. I mean, it is data manipulation, and I mean, you get quickly into what is consciousness, what are we
Hmm.
as conscious beings, and if you believe, as unfortunately I think a lot of people do believe. You want me to stop while that's going on?
That is perfectly fine, my man. Just
Okay.
roll
There's
on.
a
It's
garbage
okay. I
truck
can
going through our
minimize it.
neighborhood. Um,
Yeah, I understand.
if you believe, as I think an unfortunately large number of people in our world today do believe, that we are essentially biological computers, okay, that we're nature's way of arranging data and pulling information from it, sensing patterns and projecting meaning from that, then maybe you disagree with us, right? Like, maybe you say, no, I mean, if it's going to do the same things that we do. I don't believe that. I think that we're getting to the point now in the study of consciousness, through the work of people like V.S. Ramachandran, through
Oh
the work
yes,
of
yeah,
people
yeah.
like Donald Hoffman, who I think is probably the most interesting, um, maybe the most interesting scientist working in the world today, trying to build mathematical models of consciousness and making progress and realizing that we're never going to get to the bottom of this. you know
Yeah.
um, but there is something more to this world, to this reality that we live in, to you and I as creatures, than mere matter. And I've always believed that, or almost always believed that. I'm a Roman Catholic convert. I bring my belief system and my faith into my work. But increasingly, I think you're finding the vanguard of science coming back around to a position that is non-material. And it started with quantum physics. It started with quantum theory. Einstein understandably really dug his heels in and resisted this, because it shattered so much of the scientific progress of the last 200 to 300 years, right, coming out of the Enlightenment. And fundamentally, what it did was it completely disproved the idea of local reality. When you go down to the Planck scale, right, not only do our current models of space-time not really work, and cannot be, we can't find that bridge between kind of common everyday normal sized reality and that reality. Space-time itself ceases to have any meaning. It's just not a relevant concept, right? And so Hoffman and people like him are developing theories that what really underlies everything is consciousness, that what we see in space-time, you, me, all of it is icons. Okay, all of it is part of essentially a headset that evolution has given us for fitness, so that we can function, so that our bodies can actually like move through the world. I think that's fascinating. I think that's really, really fascinating science. But if you follow it to its logical conclusion, and you get to the point where you think that consciousness might be the, for lack of a better term, the base level of reality, you stop worrying about AI a little bit. At least I do, because I don't think it's ever going to get there.
Yeah. So you've presented a lot of amazing thoughts. There's a lot of stuff for us to delve into. And I have to say, with my background and my nerdy interests, I mean, this is something I could probably spend all day talking about. You know, um, so I had a very short conversation. Are you familiar with Jeff Kripal at all? Have you read any of his stuff?
I don't
Or
think so.
okay, all right. I'm not going to reference that then. But from a philosophical basis and an ontological basis, I've always believed that thought precedes matter. And philosophically, that's the foundation of everything. I mean, that's been the foundation of Platonic forms, of essence, and going all the way through to, really some really cool, some contemporary stuff that's happening in metaphysics, in the academy today. Everyone says that philosophy and metaphysics is dead, but it's really not. And so,
It's about it. It's
yeah,
coming back.
it really really is. And
Yeah.
but and I mean, I'm and I'm not trying to like do any kind of like name dropping for Jeff Kripal, but he wrote a book called it was reimagining the humanities and bringing back the enchantment back into the academy. And he is a professor of philosophy and religious thought at Rice University in Texas. And we had a great conversation about this topic. But I can
Mm.
see this all kind of returning and coming full circle. And what artificial general intelligence has done is it's become something of a litmus test for people's worldviews. If you want to look at somebody who has an essentially a materialistic view of reality, like Sam Altman of Chat GPT or whatever, I mean, he is a materialist. I mean, he thinks that a human
Right.
being is just a sack of chemical, these reactions that are interacting with one another, and
Sure.
emotions, thoughts, and feelings is
Materialists
just
run
an
the
empty
world.
phenomenon.
Ma-
Yes,
yeah,
yes, it
materialists
really
run the world.
is.
They
Yeah,
run the academy. They run science. They
that's
run
right. Hmm.
physics. They've had a nice long run. Not as long as the Ottomans. All
That's
runs
right.
come to
Yeah,
an end.
that's
Every
right.
scientific theory contains the seeds of its own destruction, and
That's
there
a
are
great way to put it. Yeah,
flaws
yeah.
of flaws in materialism that the early materialists recognized. It was a tool.
Well,
Uh,
the
I didn't mean
limitations
to
of
interrupt you, but
empiricism.
Bernard
Yeah. Oh
Kastrup
no, no, oh no. This is
is
great. Yes, yes,
Bernard
yes. That's
Kastrup
right.
is another
Yeah.
contemporary
Hmm.
philosopher. He's done a lot of work at CERN on sort of particle physics. I think his core scientific discipline is computer science, but he's left that basically to become like a philosopher. And he is a kind of neo idealist, I guess is the way that I would describe him. And he says nothing he's saying is original. He says it in really original and compelling ways. Um,
Well, it's really, really
but
compelling
yeah,
with
I mean,
someone who
he's
was. Yeah. Oh yeah.
no,
I'm sorry. Go
that's it.
on.
That's it.
Okay.
I'm probably about to
No,
say
that
something stupid, so you were rescuing me.
I don't know about that. I'm probably the one that's going to be stumbling over some stupidity here. but but yeah. So the artificial intelligence it's just become the litmus test for everyone's worldviews. And what's so
Hmm.
funny is like a lot of the people, and it doesn't matter if you're on the right or left or center, whatever your worldview is. The artists I've interacted with on Twitter, who I've seen on YouTube, the ones who are deep thinkers, not just your content churners that are churning out a novel a week and they don't really care about their product, but the ones who really care about the story. To write a good story, you have to understand the human being. You have to understand what conflict is. You have to have an idea of ethics. And despite their public support for a materialistic worldview that you can see in their memes, you can see in their marketing, that you can just kind of see in the cultural zeitgeist that they've absorbed, they are suffering an inner conflict with AGI because I think a lot of them know in their heart of hearts, hey, wait a minute. It's like Socrates said, you can't step into the same river twice. Oh no, no, that was Heraclitus. I'm sorry. Reality is a river. It's always changing, yet always the same. There's something weird going on here. I can't put my finger on it. And I see that conflict being played out in real time. And but the potential for the disruption of the market that AI is going to bring, I think what it's going to do is just a bunch of low grade, crappy content. Like that's going to be the first wave. I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts about that, but
Yeah.
it's going
So
through
in
a
other
major,
words,
yeah, yeah,
it's it's you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same, because
yeah.
we're humans are pretty good at churning out low grade crappy content too.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's not something I've thought of. Yeah, things are always the same; they're always changing, and there are definitely some lower content folks out there. And this isn't a judgment call on them or anything, but what's
We need it.
already, yeah,
We
yeah,
human
yeah,
beings,
we do. That's
we're
true.
content consumers, right? We're story
Yeah.
machines, not machines. I hate that term, but you know what I mean. We need
Oh
it.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, there is so much in a human being's life that is interpreted through signs and allegory and symbols. And these machines can mimic us, but I'm kind of leaning more towards your side of things. I think what we're dealing with is a super, super, super autocorrect. It's and a predictive text kind of thing. But kind of moving beyond the philosophical and kind of moving towards the mundane, I guess, or the arcane levels that we're looking at. One disturbing development is just how, on the one end of the spectrum, you have some folks that are really, really uneasy with AI. And I think we're kind of leaning towards that end of the spectrum where I in it, there's a bunch of worldview baggage that's going to come along with it. Yet on the other end of the spectrum, and these are some folks that I follow, I really, really respect, and they're highly intelligent people. They are embracing it, like it's the second coming, and they are trying to do everything they can to stay on top of millisecond development in the AI. They are just openly embracing it, and they have this level of optimism that is separated from the reality and the very real consequences that it's going to bring, and two, it's like this. I don't want to say it's an act of self delusion, but I just kind of feel like a lot of the optimists out there are deluded if they think this is something they can incorporate into their business model. Because what's going to happen is every single workflow process that can be automated through AI, is I see a slow mission creep. It's just going to keep going further and further up the ladder until where they sit. And there was this one, I'm not going to
Yeah.
call this person out, but he was talking about how great AI is. We all just need to get behind it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, what are you going to do if one day it can produce the books you're producing? I was like, what are you going to do then? Are you just going to be the CEO of a sole proprietorship on Amazon that's just producing AI works? I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, like, what's your role in this? But can you kind of speak to that level of just, it's almost like an
Yeah.
ideology. Yeah. I mean, that these people have.
Deep waters you're getting into here, right?
I said I
Um,
was trying to get out of the philosophical ones, but I jumped right back in. That's just,
I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
so I think that we are creatures fundamentally of myth, right? I mean, in many ways, we all have a myth. People who say that they don't have a myth also have a myth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those myths take different forms. Those forms lead to different ideologies, different ways of interpreting the world and reality, different ways of projecting into the future. One myth that is very, very prevalent in the world today that I think comes primarily out of the Enlightenment and some of the exuberance, around scientific discovery and advances in, you know, healthcare, understanding of human biology, is this idea of a myth of progress. That that human existence is this constantly rising, um, tide or process towards, if not perfection and godhood, something very, very close to it, right? And if you believe that, as I think a lot of people do implicitly, I don't think people sit around thinking about it, but I think it's just so it's sort of in the cultural DNA. Then that leads to certain beliefs and ideologies. One of them is the past is irredeemable. There's not a whole lot to learn from the past. Another is, well, if it's happening and it's an advancement in technology, it must be good. There's a tautology there, right? And I get it. I mean, I'm not taking shots. I'm not trying to be critical or anything like that. I'm just observing. There was another myth that held for a long, long time, and it's still out there to a certain extent. And it also has its flaws, and it also misses the mark in many ways. And that's the myth of decline. The idea that there was a golden age, and that we've kind of been drifting downwards ever since. And you find this generally in religious traditions, right? It's very much a part of the Vedic tradition in India, with the idea of yugas and the cycles of time, and that we're in the Kali Yuga now and have been for a long, long time, and it's going to last a lot longer and get a lot worse, right? But you have it also in Christianity and Judaism, to a certain extent in Islam as well. So I see this unbounded optimism, euphoria, and frankly naivete around AI as being a natural and inevitable outgrowth of a deeply held faith in the myth of progress. At some point, that myth is going to crumble. It's the expectations will not be fulfilled. Don't know when it's going to be. Don't know if it's going to be, what you've described, if it's going to be economic disruption or what have you relating to AI. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that it's not going to last forever.
Isn't this always the cycle of sciences? I mean, they promise a golden age. On the eve of the Industrial Revolution, there were books being written about, hey, all class distinctions are going to be eliminated, kind of like a proto communist, kind of society.
Sure.
And I know, and I'm trying to rack my brain, but in Weimar, Germany, in the 1920s, there was a film that was put out about how, as Germany was becoming more automized in like their factories and stuff, how they were going to produce surplus goods. And everyone back in the 19th century up until the mid 20th century, what are we going to do with the surplus goods? Was like a big thing in economic thought. But the movie was about this new city. I mean, the city was like built into the sky. I'm trying to remember what it is, but it was the cultural elites back then version of where they thought humanity was going. And if you look at the economics of the world back in the 20s, if you looked at the post, First World War, just moral wasteland, then I would have said, yeah, that probably could be a future that's going on. And the technology did arrive. They had the transistor, they had
Mm-hmm.
flight, they had turbine flight, but the atom bomb that came along, and then you had the Second World War, and it's like the future ended up being something just completely and just totally different. And with the advent of AGI, I just can't help but think, I'm like, all the young dudes with their high and tight haircuts that's popping up on my Twitter feed, 20 things that I need to know to get ahead of the AI, the revolution and all. Um, they're going to be so far off the mark if they're not bots themselves, if they're not robots themselves, which could very well be the case. And a quick question: have you ever read? This would have been a book by Rene Guenon, and it was called "The Reign of Quantity." Or no, it was called "The Signs of the Times and the Reign of Quantity." Have you ever read
Rene
that book?
Guenon.
Are you? That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. I am butchering the last
Yeah.
name, but
Yeah. I've got it on my bookshelf. You can't see it. It's in the other room. It's impenetrable, isn't it? His writing. I mean, I like some of his ideas, and I mean, he's such an original thinker.
and I'm
But it's
sorry, his
really,
name
that
just
writing
kind of
is really,
popped
really
into
hard to
it.
get
Yeah,
through,
yeah,
isn't
it
it?
did. Well,
It was for me
yeah,
anyway. I don't
he
know.
wrote well. He wrote in a really archaic kind of way, and he kind of wrote in this Nietzschean, "Hey, I know all this information, but I'm not going to tell you how I know this information. I'm just going to tell you the information." But
Yeah.
yeah, and his rage against jazz and all, I thought was a bit, well, I couldn't understand the cultural context that he was coming from in it, but something that he wrote in there was this idea that matter is a lower expression of the immaterial thought, kind of like what we were discussing in the very beginning of this.
Frank, did I
I
lose
look
you?
at A.G.I, and if I could resurrect two people right now and bring them up and talk to them, it would be Rene and it would be a Neil Postman. And I would,
Neil Postman?
yes, sir. Neil
I'm not
Postman.
familiar.
So he wrote a book called "Amusing Ourselves to Death," and he would probably be a philosophical determinist, where he believed that I'm not sure if he believed in free will, but he wasn't like a fatalist either. But but whenever he wrote "Amusing Ourselves to Death," this was a book about whenever TV was really becoming mainstream. So this
Mm,
was like in the 50s and 60s. And what he wrote about was this idea that the form that we consume content informs the content itself. And it can get like wrapped up in this feedback loop. And he said, actually, human beings have a capacity for immense levels of concentration. And he says, people saying that we have these short attention spans, that's actually not true. He said, you're raised from birth on the radio, and now this new confangled device called the TV that switches to a commercial that's affecting our brain structure and our ability to interpret reality
sure.
around us. I would have loved to hear what he had to say about the internet, and especially about what he has to say about artificial general intelligence. But those are the two of them that, man, if I could pull them up from whatever, probably depths of hell that they're currently, if I could give them a little
Oh,
bit of
I hope
respite, I
not.
don't know. I know, right? I should be more optimistic, but
Guénon
um,
was a
yeah,
French Catholic intellectual who became Muslim Sufi, right?
a bunch of them did. Yeah, that's right. A
Yeah.
bunch of them, yeah, they turned to Muslim, to Sufism. And I wonder if the universalism that's prevalent in that belief system, the Ottomans never
Has to have
quite
been
managed
appealing.
to. Oh yeah, yeah. They never quite managed to stomp them out, but they tried.
No, no, and thank God for that.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
for
have, I
sure.
have, I have, one of the, so there's a lot of Sufism in my book, in Our Lady of the Artilects. I have
Oh my
a
gosh,
very
guys,
close
you have
friend
to
who's
get
a
this
Sufi.
book. Yeah.
Very close friend who's a Sufi Muslim. I knew him in college, and he was like Salafi. I mean, he was
Mm.
hardcore, great guy. I mean, I loved him. He was a beautiful spirit then and now, but he's a Sufi. And I've read a lot of Sufism, just again as research for this, and it's just there is a great beauty and a great appeal in it because it is so universalist, right? And even when you go back to like probably the greatest of Sufis, Ibn al-Arabi,
Oh yeah, yeah,
who
yeah.
lived at the same time as Averroes.
Hmm.
There's a funny story about that, but uh, it I can't read his writing today and not think he's describing quantum mechanics. He's describing non-local reality. He's describing, what really fills the universe below the Planck length. How does reality come from non-reality? How does the manifest emerge from the non-manifest? I mean, really, this is 800 years before Niels Bohr. It's incredible stuff.
That's
Anyway,
incredible. Yeah.
so I hope that I hope that I hope I meet a lot of Sufis in the next world because I think they're really, really, really interesting.
Same here. Yeah, yeah. Are you familiar with? Uh, so we don't know if he was Persian or Turkish, but he started the Bedladim rebellions in the Ottoman Empire under Sultan Mehmed the First. So this would have been what, about the 1420s, 1430s, and he was like I guess an early precursor to the Sufis. But some of the surviving texts that we think are by him, that the Ottomans just didn't destroy, and he was really against like the landed nobility that was developing in the Ottoman system at the time. So as the Ottoman Empire was expanding into Europe, they were trying to ape the Byzantine Empire, and they wanted the
Hmm.
trappings, the government, the structures, and all that. And he was against the land uh, distribution that was going on into these, small, these landed estates into these mega landed estates that the Sultan was undertaking. But um, the Ottomans eventually caught him and they executed him. But the writings that have survived to us, uh, he had a um, it was a hypothetical where he's in dialogue with like a demon, and the demon has constructed out of like coal, and there's like these old magical practices that had survived, from the Turkish tradition going back to China, was kind of wrapped up in it. But they had constructed out of brick, mortar, clay, and coal this entity that could move and talk. And the demon was like, hey, I'm just as good as God. I created this entity.
Mm.
And Bedladam basically was given like, almost this theory of physics about how the sand, well, it's all wrong, like how the sand will create friction with the coal and it creates this and this thing. But his critique of the demon was, you built this thing that mimics a real creature that can talk, but that's not really words. There's no thought behind it. And
Right.
man, I think he's about, let's see, about 500 years before his time now. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, but just a
Yeah. I
student of the
mean,
human
so
mind.
he was
I
describing
mean,
he
it's
was
just,
describing like the Chinese room paradox,
oh
and
yeah, yeah,
which
yeah,
kind
the
of
Chinese room paradox.
right, which kind of nullifies Alan Turing's idea for how to test whether artificial general intelligence was in fact conscious and exercising free will. And the Chinese room experiment was, I'm going to butcher it, but basically it's like, if somebody was in a room and you're outside the room and you're interacting with them in English, could you tell if they were an English speaker? And you can't, because what you don't know is, are there inputs coming in, and they have, there's a code, kind of a codex on the end, that they use to translate it and then push back out to you stuff that you interpret and understand in your own way. Like I said, I'm butchering it, but that's what he that it sounds like that. Yeah.
Whenever I make a clip and I share it on the internet, it's going to be that clip. I'm joking. I butchered it. That's going to be the clip that gets shared everywhere.
Yeah.
But no, that's so brilliant. I mean, that's a good an Eastern critique of Western materialism. I think. I mean, it's and what was so impoverishing about the Turing test is, talk about the most low hanging fruit. I mean, it's
Right.
just I don't know. It's just like, well, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about. These people think that we are all material, that there's no spark to humanity, is what it is. But let's see. I'm going to make a third attempt here to kind of get us out of the deep waters here, which I could do all day. By the way, I mean,
I'm
I could
sorry.
probably just talk. Oh no,
You
no, no.
you
Oh, it
you
isn't your
you
fault.
probably picked the
This is
wrong
both of us.
guest.
Oh no, this is gold. This is gold. These are the conversations nobody else is having about it. The conversations right now about AI, Andrew, I'm going to tell you, is how to optimize your workflow,
Oh
how
God.
to how to get AI to bring me good, more goodies, and how can I get a leg up on my competition. That's the conversation that's
Sure.
happening right now, and more power to them. But that is, what, that's just not the world I want to live in. I
Well,
guess that's why I
Frank.
majored in humanities. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the risk of pushing us further down the rabbit hole instead of trying to get
I'm
back
not
to
going to worry
where.
about it. I'm not going to worry about
Okay.
it. Let's just go, bro.
So
That's
so
it.
to me, there's a huge missing piece of the conversation around AI, and I think in general, when you're looking at popular discourse in the media, your best bet to get at the truth is to look at what's not being said, right? I
Oh
mean, that's
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
I think that's a nice skeptical way to approach our current media narrative culture. What's not being talked about as much as it should be is transhumanism. And that to me is
Oh
sort of like the
yeah,
other
yeah.
hand of this movement. It scares me a hell of a lot more than AI, right? Because I don't, like I said, I mean, I'm fundamentally skeptical that AGI will ever be able to do what humans do. I don't know that it will ever really get to the point where it can exercise free will and um, exercise moral autonomy. I mean, these are massive, massive challenges that in a lot of ways go back to like the hard problem of consciousness, right? Which briefly is, there is no way, nobody has yet discovered a way, and it seems like nobody will be able to discover a way to use physical processes in the brain to explain the qualia of experience, the taste of chocolate, right? The smell of roses, the feeling of love for a particular child. These cannot, that is, doesn't seem like a bridge that science can cross at this point. So I look at AI and I'm comforted by that, because I think, well, okay, right? Like that kind of conforms to my worldview and my view of reality and the human person. But transhumanism is all about changing the human person and making it more machine-like. And that terrifies me, because I think it is potentially the greatest mechanism of control that we've ever had. Control over thoughts, maybe even more than that, maybe control over feelings. Do you love? Who do you love? Why do you love? What do you love? You know, if there is a way to hack that and marry it to what we call artificial intelligence, but what is actually just massive data manipulation, that's fucking terrifying.
Hell yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the ultimate goal of transhumanism is, first of all, it's a religion that's born of postmodernism, and the postmodern idea that there is no human being, that we are simply an expression at the very most or least of the universe observing itself, this really weird infinite feedback loop. But what they want to do is alter the human soul, because the transhumanists, to kind of add another layer of terror, they disagree with the materialist. A transhumanist will tell you, look, I love my father who's buried in the graveyard. Like Kurtz, oh gosh, I cannot pronounce that man's name.
Kurzweil.
That's it. Kurzweil will tell you there is something intrinsically human outside of himself that causes him to feel a connection to his passed away father in the graveyard. That's why he gets up at 4 a.m. He floats in his deprivation tank for an hour. He eats all of his greens. He does all this stuff, takes all these vitamins. And what he wants to do is structure the human soul and then alter it, is what he wants to do. It's like they admit, they will concede the ethical and ontological push of the old world, and they'll take the postmodern understanding of man's destiny and try and wrap it around that. They want to alter the human soul, change the human soul, obtained immortality for themselves. And a lot of them say, hey, this is the destiny of the human race. This is how we're going to conquer the universe, essentially.
Right.
And if you listen to them talk, they're talking about going beyond the universe into multiple dimensions of reality. I mean, and what they essentially say is that technology is simply a human thought that is powered by the human soul manipulating matter. So what's real scary is, like, they're more in line with our camp than they are with the materialist camp. Their
That is
philosophical
true.
worldview. I mean, that's what's so damn scary about them. I'm
100%.
like, shit, dude. I mean, it's and
You know,
yeah,
Bernard Kastrup, to come back to him, and I highly, highly recommend him, for you and your viewers. He's got a lot of talks available on YouTube
really
and he's
quick. Let
very
me write his name
clear.
down. Let me write his
It's
name down, because
yeah,
if
it's
I don't,
Bernardo
okay,
Kastrup with a K. Um, really accessible, um, effective communicator too. Um, he talks about how at the beginning of, what we would call today the scientific revolution or the Enlightenment, the founding fathers of the Enlightenment knew that materialism was bullshit. Descartes and some of them, Voltaire, I mean, they openly talked about it. But what materialism did for them was it created a safe space, where they could have their idea set and work on their projects and pursue their philosophy of, the sort of the natural world, free from any threats from the church. Okay, it was kind of like, you take this, we'll take that, and they thought that the materialists, they thought that they had gotten the better end of that bargain, right? Because they're like, well, this is the world. We have the universe. We have everything. We have all of matter and energy to work with. And the church is just going to be reduced to scolding about morals, you know, and offering, solace at hard times in people's lives. And that's fine. They were fine with that. But they knew that there was something wrong with materialism. There was a flaw at its core, and that it couldn't last. It couldn't explain everything. And we're approaching, I think, the time when it's no longer sustainable. And ironically, it's in a lot of ways, it's like the religious traditions that really are so much closer to the truth about who we are and what we are. And I think what you see in guys like Kurzweil is this kind of like either conscious or subconscious awareness of this. They're trying to switch the bargain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that they can talk about the things that actually matter.
And what's so scary about them is like they are acutely aware of religion's most powerful draw and drive. Like you can watch an interview with him, and if the concept or the conversation goes on God, he'll start pulling up stuff from the Council of Trent, the first Lateran Council. He'll start talking about the Indian Bhagavad Gita, I think, if I'm pronouncing that right. And he's read this text. I mean, he's read it, he's familiar with it. And they have constructed not only a new religion, like, like you're saying, but, um, they have the means. I kind of wondered, like, I don't think the ultimate goal of the transhumanists is ever going to happen. Um, I kind of think that,
Right.
whatever the arbitrator of good and evil is, um, well, I don't know. I mean, the Holocaust happened. The good Lord could kind of sit back and, all right, I'm going to save the four folks who didn't go under transhumanism. I don't know, but um, I don't. I think their potential to do damage is just on an exponential scale, far more than just simple AI. And another
I
thing,
completely agree.
that's really funny about them is they're skeptical that AI is going to be able to do everything that it can do. Like they would agree with us about, hey, it's not going to become conscious. It's not going to become like a sentient thing. They
Right.
are adamant that AI should get no rights whatsoever.
Hmm.
And but yeah, man, it's a really really bizarre world. May you live in interesting times, right? May you live in interesting times. And
Boy, do we ever.
oh yes, we do. We certainly do. So one more thing I would like to do. I'm gonna have to get rolling out of here in about 15 minutes, but I had a little poll on Twitter. Speaking of the devil, right? So I had a little poll on there, and I said, writers, if you decide to incorporate AI into your creative process, no judgment. If you decide to storyboard it, idea board it, spaghetti board it, if you want to use it 5% or 100%, would you disclose that to your readers? Like, would there be a little line underneath the title, 5% AI or AI assisted? Only 9 of them responded to my poll. I can't remember if you were one of them, but the answer was yes. And these were some folks I really respect. They are producing on a consistent basis very high quality fiction on their own, very high quality. And all of them had kind of the same feelings that when they messaged me privately, and that was, I'm never going to use AI in any capacity. And I said, okay, would you use it to edit your work? Would you use it to help you craft a marketing campaign? Would you use it to, and it's kind of like gaining weight. We gain weight this much every single day. There's a little
Yeah.
mission creep with them.
Yeah.
And
Well, you've
okay,
already said it.
yeah,
It's autocorrect on steroids.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it is. So, I mean, would they use it? And then they said, you know what? Now that I put it that way, they were unsure. But the consensus in the writing community is almost wholly negative towards AGI. And I think that is a good amount of skepticism. And most of them say that they would disclose the fact that they were using AI. But if we look at the publishers, and I'm not talking about you, the indie publishers out there, like a Haunted Press or the Hooded Dead talk. I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about the big four or three now. Heck, I don't know. They're always eating each other. I don't know what's going on in New York. It's like the Octagon. You know, they all start fighting and eating each other. But they have openly solicited works from authors. They're established authors for quote collaborative work with AI. They have said that they're going to start using AI generated voices, the synth voices for audiobooks. They're already working on that. They are jumping into this thing because I suspect that the big publishing companies, one, they don't give a shit about authors. They don't care about people. And you can be a dyed in the wool, you can be a dyed in the wool, a capitalist, but still care about the human being. The amount of just sheer callousness that they have displayed and tone deafness is astounding. I want all the authors out there to know if your dream is to get published by the big publishing houses, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You may have a submission and it becomes a bestseller tomorrow, but I don't think the publishers, they've never liked you to begin with, and they want to replace you. This is them telling
100%.
you they want to replace you.
100%.
And I guarantee you another thing. I bet they own the rights to the big writers like King, Kuntz, and Rice. I bet there's all kind of stuff in those contracts when they saw that AI would have been something viable in the mid 2000s. Hey, if you're going to write like Stephen King, his narrative voice, you want to use his style and all, who really owns that? I mean, is that the publishing companies now? Who owns that data?
Well, it's I mean, you know, I think about it also in terms of like Hollywood and the writer's strike that's going on right now. I don't think it's an accident that that's happening at this exact moment. I think, look, I mean, what's probably going to happen is they'll come to the table, there'll be a negotiation, both sides will make some concessions, the writers will get back to work, but their position will have been chipped away at, you know. And I think it's just an opening salvo that you know, the studios would love to eliminate writers. You know,
Oh yeah,
like
sure.
I mean, at some point they probably would love to eliminate actors and actresses too. But you know, anything that's a cost in the system to them, and anything that they don't have 100% control over, they would love to take out of the equation. I mean, you know, at Hollywood, I mean, look, as bad as the big three are, you know, in publishing, as bad as, you know, our industry is, I mean, Hollywood is, you know, 1,000 times worse,
Yeah, that's
more
right.
corrupt, greedier, bigger, um, more Machiavellian. So it's going to happen there first.
At first, they came for the cover designers, and I did not speak because I was not a designer. Then they came for the editors.
They came for the screenwriters. I was not a screenwriter.
Right. Yeah, I know how it's going to be.
Right.
More power to them. I hope they're able to get some protections and concessions. And I cannot believe that the writers of a show like Game of Thrones, like, you know, these shows that have like trickled down into the cultural, you know, the lexicon, those writers are not getting anything off of the streaming services. They're not getting anything out of the package deals. Nothing at all. I mean, it's just so sad. And they had to fight hell to get the whenever DVDs came out, they had to fight like hell to get anything off of that. But now that's pretty much gone. So that's
can I plug somebody on? Can I plug somebody else on this?
Feel free to do
if you're interested in learning about like what's really going on in the writer's strike and a little bit of the history of this stuff, and also, you know, kind of a peek behind the the red velvet curtain of Hollywood. I have a friend, Kamran Pasha, who is a screenwriter, award-winning screenwriter, and he's written novels. Excuse me. And he has a Patreon that covers Hollywood. And he's so far ahead of everybody else on this stuff, it will blow your mind. Like stuff that he writes about in his Patreon will show up in, you know, the trades weeks, months later.
That's incredible. Okay, you know what? I'm going to have
it's good stuff.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, let me flag this little part right here. I'll be sure to have.
He's also my Sufi friend.
That is awesome. A Sufi, of course, is going to blow it up and bring Hollywood down.
Oh yeah, Kamran is a powerful light.
All right, that is awesome. That's really, really cool. Well, Andrew, the next time I'm going to have you on, I'm going to have you on again if you're so gracious. I will have
I
read
would
Our
love to.
Lady of Artilects, yeah, and I'm going to familiarize myself with your work very well, so we can have a good in-depth discussion of it. And I'm not sure that we covered exactly point by point what I wanted to cover, but we did something far
Sorry.
better. I think we've. Oh no, no, no! I think that I went hunting for a wild turkey, and instead I ended up, killing a velociraptor. I feel like we've come back with some very, very exotic game that's going to be even cooler on that. So, I really appreciate your time.
Well, listen,
Thank you
I've
for.
really enjoyed it. This
Oh
is
yeah, for
fun,
sure.
fun conversation.
I am
Thank you
always
for
down for
having me.
fun conversation. Yeah, sure, sure. All right. Well, you fare well, and until next time.